Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
What's your stance on China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims?
Frankly, I don't know much about that. ये सारा जो पर्दे का कॉन्सेप्ट है ये क्या है कि टेम्पटेशन ना हो माशरे में.
Prime Minister Imran Khan called Osama Bin Laden a martyr.
Well,
Simple as
out of context. Out of context. He was quoted out of context.
If they use your soil against us, it bothers me.
Are they?
Yes, they are.
How?
How? By carrying out terrorist activities.
The Taliban should not be blamed for the violence in Afghanistan. Osama Bin Laden was a martyr. Muslim rights must be fought for, except for the Muslims of China. And rape victims, well, why do they wear scanty clothes? What do you make of these statements? And how would you judge a Prime Minister or a Foreign Minister who says such things? We're talking about the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan. In the past few days, they've given 2 interviews and they've given themselves away. They've exposed the true face of Pakistan, of a terror state that supports violence in neighboring countries and suffers from deep-seated misogyny. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you details of what these 2 men said and how the people of their country are reacting and how the world should be reacting. This is the story of a former cricket captain's self-goals. Also on the show, spreading positivity but not the China way. On International Yoga Day, a special report on how yoga became a tool of cultural diplomacy for India. Meanwhile, China is trying to fix a dwindling population. The government is cracking down on private tuitions to boost birth rate. We'll explain. Roti Kapra or Makan is not just a movie dialogue. It can make or break leaders. The Swedish government has fallen over house rent. And Japan will impose stricter quarantine on players from India because of higher Wuhan virus cases here. India says these rules are unfair. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
In his first press conference, Iran's new president and ultra-conservative cleric Ibrahim Raisi has said no to the prospect of meeting US President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has warned the Western powers to wake up to the threat of Iran before returning to the nuclear accord. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said China will face isolation in the international community if it does not cooperate with a further probe into the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. India has recorded its highest single-day COVID-19 vaccination, with over 7.5 million doses administered on the first day of the country's centralized vaccination policy. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani will be visiting Washington on Friday to meet US President Joe Biden to discuss the US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Chief Peacemaker Dr. Abdullah will be accompanying Ghani for the talks. The Myanmar junta chief arrived in Moscow on Sunday on his second overseas trip since the February 1st coup. According to reports, junta leader Min Aung Hlaing was attending the Moscow Conference for International Security at the invitation of the Russian defense minister. The US Navy has started carrying out what it calls full ship stock trials by detonating powerful explosives to test whether its aircraft carriers are ready for war. A Navy statement said that an explosion was triggered as part of work to evaluate the battle readiness of aircraft carrier the USS Gerald Ford. Astronauts conducted a 6-hour-long space station on Sunday to install solar panels, which will increase the electrical power of the station. Parts of Florida and other southern states were battered by heavy wind and rain as Tropical Depression Claudette made its way across coastal states. 9 children were among 10 killed in a multi-vehicle crash on an Alabama highway. Spaniard Jon Rahm has won the first major of his golf career with a one-shot victory at the US Open at Torrey Pines. Rahm edged South African Louis Oosthuizen in a wild final round that turned into a two-man race as several other contenders came undone on the back nine. Rahm was the only one to avoid a bogey, and he produced stunning birdies on the final 2 holes to win the title. He has also regained the world #1 ranking from Dustin Johnson. Up to 10,000 domestic spectators will be allowed inside each venue for the next month's Tokyo Olympics. Organizers announced today that a cap of 50% will apply to smaller venues, and that fans will be required to wear masks and refrain from shouting or cheering in a loud voice. These limits are liable to be revised if cases rise. The decision cuts against the recommendation of medical experts who had said that holding the event without fans was the least risky option.
As we begin a new week, the Financial Action Task Force or the FATF is meeting to ponder on the same old question: should Pakistan be blacklisted for terror financing? You see, Pakistan is a terror state, and we know that. Pakistan sponsors terrorists, and the world knows that. But it hasn't done anything about it. Pakistan was grey-listed by the FATF in 2018, the Financial Action Task Force, which is a global terror financing watchdog. Now we're in the middle of 2021. And in these 3 years, Islamabad has barely moved the needle on ending the flow of funds to terrorists. And the FATF is still dragging its feet. It has not blacklisted Pakistan, even though terrorists continue to operate there with impunity on Pakistani soil. So will the FATF blacklist Pakistan this time? Before they make their decision, they should watch this story. Tonight, we'll give you some very compelling reasons on why Pakistan should be blacklisted, some statements that expose Pakistan further. And these statements come straight from the horse's mouth. 2 top leaders, Prime Minister Imran Khan and Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi of Pakistan, have revealed the true face of their country. Its hypocrisy on terrorism and its tacit backing of terrorists. Take the case of Osama Bin Laden. Pakistan gave him shelter while taking American money to fight him. And 10 years since his killing, the Pakistani government won't even call him a terrorist. In their eyes, Osama bin Laden is a martyr. And I'm not the one saying it. Shah Mahmood Qureshi is the foreign minister of Pakistan. Listen to this.
Is he a martyr? You disagree? Osama bin Laden?
I will let that pass.
Let that pass. What does that even mean? And why wouldn't Qureshi call Osama bin Laden a terrorist? Because it flows from the top, you see. Last year, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan called Osama bin Laden a martyr. And this was not a campaign speech. It happened right inside the Pakistani parliament.
Osama bin Laden को इन्होंने अमेरिकन ने आके एबटाबाद में मार दिया, शहीद कर दिया. उसके बाद क्या हुआ? Osama bin Laden को इन्होंने अमेरिकन ने आके एबटाबाद में मार दिया, शहीद कर दिया. उसके बाद क्या हुआ?
Members of the Pakistani government said nothing then. Why would they question their captain now? Osama bin Laden died more than a decade ago. But there is no change in Pakistan's policy on terrorists. It remains, to this day, a state sponsor of terrorists. In fact, in Afghanistan, Pakistan is playing a key role in bringing terrorists back to the mainstream. In an interview over the weekend, Imran Khan was asked about Afghanistan. He said there should be a settlement before America leaves. It should be a political settlement, one that involves the Taliban and the civilian government. Imran Khan said there is no other solution. And now we've known this for a while. What Pakistan has been up to behind the scenes, it has been steadily supporting the Taliban and taking control of dozens of districts by force. Since the month of May, when American forces began to leave, the Taliban has taken control of 50 districts. How did they do it? Thanks to local influence, military offensives, and government retreats. Violent attacks continue across the country, and Pakistan is defending all of this. Last week, Shah Mahmood Qureshi came to the Taliban's defense. In fact, when asked about the growing violence, Qureshi said blaming the Taliban for the escalation would be, quote unquote, an exaggeration.
Taliban, let me just finish. The violence is higher because of Taliban. Again, that would be an exaggeration.
Now, allow me to show you what exaggeration really means. In that same interview, as he was trying to deflect blame from the Taliban, Qureshi accused India of, quote unquote, carrying out terrorist activities from Afghanistan.
Obviously.
That was Pakistan's foreign minister pushing conspiracy theories about India just to take the world's attention away from the activities that it is conducting with the Taliban. In 1 week, Pakistan's top leaders have struck 2 own goals with 2 interviews. But the embarrassment does not stop there. Pakistan's Prime Minister has repeatedly declared himself the defender of the rights of Muslims worldwide. But when asked about Uyghur Muslims of China, he has always come up short. In one interview, he said he did not know about them. In another interview, he said he won't talk about them. The hypocrisy was exposed yet again in his latest interview. And let me read out that exchange for you. The reporter begins by asking, just across your border in Western China, the Chinese government has imprisoned 1 million Uyghur Muslims in re-education camps. The Chinese government has tortured Muslims, forcibly sterilized them, and they have destroyed mosques in Xinjiang. They've also punished Muslims for fasting, praying, even giving Muslim names to their children. This is the reporter asking. Why are you outspoken about Islamophobia in Europe and the United States, but totally silent about the genocide of Muslims in Western China? What do you think Imran Khan's response was? Let me quote it word for word. Whatever issues we have with the Chinese, we speak to them behind closed doors. China has been one of the greatest friends to us. In our most difficult times, China came to the rescue when our economy was struggling. Basically, we cannot say much because the Chinese give us money. When asked if it makes him feel sick that he must remain silent, Imran Khan replied, and I'm quoting again, I look around the world, what's happening in Palestine, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Afghanistan. Am I going to start talking about everything? Well, he shouldn't. What do we do? What do we say to Pakistan's leaders who keep shoving their foot in their mouth? Speech is silver, silence, they say, is gold. But there's more speech to report from Pakistan. In the past, the very same Prime Minister, Imran Khan, has blamed Bollywood for rape. He has also asked women to wear a veil because, quote unquote, and I'm quoting what he said, not everyone has the willpower to avoid temptation. And now once again, Prime Minister Khan has dished out yet another pearl of wisdom for women. Our next report tells you all about it.
In Imran Khan's worldview, Bollywood is the reason behind rapes.
बॉलीवुड में भी कभी आज से 30-40 साल पहले आप कभी इस तरह की फाशी नहीं देखते थे. अब वो इतना गंद आ गया है. मुझे नहीं पता कौन सा टीका लगाया मुझे.
Nurses are heavenly virgins.
वो टीका ऐसा लगाया कि ना मुझे तकलीफ भी खत्म हो गई, सब कुछ दुनिया बदल गई. वो जो नर्सेस थी वो मुझे हूरें नजर आनी शुरू हो गई.
And veils can protect women from sexual assault.
ये सारा जो पर्दे का कॉन्सेप्ट है ये क्या है कि टेम्पटेशन ना हो माशरे में.
Lecturing women on modesty seems to be Imran Khan's favorite hobby, because he just cannot seem to stop. The Pakistani Prime Minister has done it again. In an interview to an American news website, Imran Khan said, if a woman is wearing very few clothes, it will have an impact on men, unless they are robots. It is just common sense. The horror doesn't stop there. Imran Khan was asked if he was blaming rape victims with his comments about women's clothes. He called the accusation nonsense. His voters did not agree, it seems. Pakistanis took to social media to slam their Prime Minister. One journalist was disgusted, appalled and outraged by Imran Khan's comments. As shocking as the comments are, they're not surprising. Sexism runs deep in Pakistani politics. 4 years ago, Nawaz Sharif said he was grateful that his female supporters were different from the women campaigners of PTI. And as the president of Pakistan, Asif Ali Zardari had called Sarah Palin gorgeous. Imran Khan is no different. He once took on Bilawal Bhutto Zardari with this sexist remark.
मैं बिलावल भुट्टो साहिबा की तरह मैं कोई कागज की पर्ची पे नहीं आया था कि जी मुझे वालदा ने जायदाद में पार्टी दे दी है.
Taking a cue from him, one of his cabinet colleagues attacked Maryam Nawaz.
खूबसूरत तो है, मैं सच बोलूंगा, लेकिन ये भी सुन लो कि आपके टैक्स के पैसे से नवाज शरीफ की 2 हुकूमतों में करोड़ों रुपए की सर्जरियां कराई हैं इसने अपने आप को ठीक करने की.
Imran Khan rose to power by promising a new Pakistan. He's failing to deliver on most counts, but none starker than this. Forget ending misogyny, the Prime Minister is fostering it. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Demography is destiny, an ageless phrase coined by French philosopher Auguste Comte. He was talking about real estate in 19th century Europe. But pick any country today, it still rings true. A young, healthy population is a blessing, an aging, dependent one, well, not so much. China realized this in the 1970s. They were on the cusp of a population disaster, so they introduced the one-child policy. They legislated demographics. Did it work? Well, it did, on paper at least. China's birth rates dropped. The immediate crisis was averted. But here's the problem. In China, family planning was not an option. It was the law. And when you legislate demographics, destiny kicks you hard. And this is the result. 12 million babies were born in 2020, the lowest recorded births since the 1960s. In crude terms, China is running out of people. It's running out of factory workers and soldiers. How is Beijing planning to tackle this? With more legislation. Last month, China unveiled the 3-child policy. And it's exactly as it sounds, 3 kids per family. But some experts said it may be too little too late, so China is going one step further. According to reports, Beijing is planning to lift all birth restrictions by 2025. No more 1-child or 2-child or 3-child policies. Parents can decide for themselves, at least theoretically, because in China, well, you never know. But why 2025? Why not immediately? You see, China follows the system of 5-year plans. The current one expires in 2025, so the next plan will supposedly eliminate birth restrictions. It will start from northeastern China. This is often called the Chinese Rust Belt. In the last decade, population dropped 1.2% in this region, so it is an obvious candidate to test out the policy. But the question is, will it work? Family planning is extremely organic. Nobody has kids because the state asked them to. The conditions must be perfect to raise a family. People should want it. This means affordable health care too, a vast school network, and economical living conditions. In China, that is not the case. I'll give you an example. In 2005, the cost of raising a child was $76,000 in China. Today, it is $300,000, 4 times more in 15 years. So there's no incentive for Chinese couples to have kids. It's just too expensive. How will Beijing fix this? By cracking down on tuition centers. You heard that right. China is cracking down on tuition centers to boost its failing birth rate. Let me explain this. One of the biggest expenses in raising a child is education, and not just schools, but private tuitions. It's a $120 billion industry in China. They work through weekends, vacations, summer. It's less of education, more of an assembly line, an early introduction into the rat race in China. There are 2 problems with Chinese tuitions. 1, they're a nightmare for children. 2, they're very expensive. So Beijing is planning a crackdown. A new watchdog will regulate private tuitions in the country. What will this watchdog control? fees, content, schedules, training qualifications. Basically, it's a communist takeover of private tuitions in China. And on the face of it, it looks appealing, a breather for kids and less expenses for parents. But there is a backhanded motive here. Private tuitions is the new frontier in China. Nearly 75% of Chinese children attend them, which means it is a cash cow. Every Chinese tech giant has waded into tuitions. ByteDance, Tencent, Alibaba, they're all in this game. Obviously, the regime does not like this. Xi Jinping wants schools to educate children, and they want the government to regulate it. When Beijing announced this decision, tuition companies in China lost billions of dollars in market value. Some of them were planning to announce IPOs, but not anymore because the Chinese regime is taking charge of tuitions. Another motive is to control content. China says it wants to maintain the quality of tuitions, which is another way of saying there isn't enough propaganda there at schools. This is not a problem because the party sets the curriculum. But private tutors had a free pass until now. Now, this new watchdog is going to decide the syllabus. It will also decide the professors who teach this syllabus. So two things can happen. One, the tuition industry may perish altogether. All the regulations will spook new investors, and education will again be a state monopoly. The second thing that can happen is the tuition industry survives, not as a thriving business, but as a heavily controlled and censored wing of the regime. Either way, it's a win for Beijing. And that sums up the problem with Chinese policymakers. They do not want young blood. They want loyal, brainwashed young blood. If demography is indeed destiny on China's innocent children. Sweden's Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, has got himself an unwanted record. He is the first Swedish leader to lose a confidence vote, the first ever, and that too by a sizable margin. What did he do to deserve this? He apparently failed to control the housing crisis in his country. He wanted to deregulate house rent. His allies did not. And this became a big issue. The result is a political deadlock and a collapsed government. So where does Sweden go from here? Here's a report.
Food, clothing and shelter. The holy triumvirate of governance. Tick these boxes and you can cling on to power. Miss out on one and you could get the boot. Just ask Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. Fresh out of power thanks to a real estate crisis. Löfven is a social democrat. He's been Prime Minister since 2014. In the last couple of years, a property crisis has kept him busy. A bitter lesson on welfare economics. In Sweden, the government controls the rent. They don't trust the market to deliver affordable housing. Great news for tenants until no one wants to be a builder anymore. It's simple economics. If the rents are low, what's the point of building houses? And the problem doesn't end there. No houses means no places to stay. People looking to rent a house often have to wait years. And buying one is not an option unless you're a millionaire. It's a full-blown housing crisis. And Stefan Löfven thought he had a solution. The Prime Minister wanted to deregulate rent. Let the market take over. But his allies didn't agree. The left party argued it would raise prices and widen the rich-poor gap. For them it was clear. Löfven had to go.
Ändå valde vi i Vänsterpartiet.
We chose to vote against Löfven as Prime Minister. It was not an easy decision, but we do it. It isn't okay to be unreasonable in a difficult parliamentary situation. There is a limit for us. Market rents and higher rents. Yes, the government has lost our confidence and we have done something that is perceived as unusual in politics. We kept our word.
Punkten om marknadshyror och höjda hyror.
The final result was 181 to 109. A decisive rejection of the government. But Löfven's exit is just the beginning of uncertainty in Sweden. He has 1 week and 2 options to choose from. Number 1, call for a snap election. Or number 2, ask the Speaker to choose a new government. WION, being a seasoned politician, is giving nothing away.
Regardless of what happens now, my party and myself will, together with others, be available to shoulder the responsibility to lead the country. My primary focus has always been, is and will always be to do what is best for Sweden.
Neither options look appealing. Opinion polls put the centre-left and centre-right blocs neck and neck. So a new election could mean a hung house. What about a caretaker regime? It would govern for just 1 year. Little chance for radical policies or change. WION's ouster exposes the reality behind Sweden's rosy image. The economic cost of a welfare state. The irreconcilable differences in domestic ideologies. And the myth of an eternally happy population. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The year was 1968. The Beatles were taking the music world by storm. They were the most preeminent band. Their songs would coo in cafes, cars and carnivals. But the Beatles were also an exhausted band. Each of the 4 band members was fighting a personal battle, be it with drugs or mental health. And no one saw this until in February 1968. That's when the Beatles turned to India to heal themselves. They checked into the Indian hill town of Rishikesh, spent months practicing yoga. By the end of their India trip, the Beatles had written some 48 songs. They had steered away from LSD. They were writing more, they were composing more. There was a profound change in their music. The band's trip to India was one of its most creative phases. And they said it was all thanks to yoga. Soon more people warmed up to the practice. Several Indian yogis took yoga overseas. Thousands saw first-hand results. The word spread like fire. Yoga became a rage, a positive rage. But it took decades for the world to officially recognize it. In 2014, soon after Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India, the United Nations recognized the 21st of June as International Yoga Day. The Modi government made yoga a tool of Indian diplomacy.
We all are praying for each other's well-being. If there are threats to humanity, yoga often gives us a way of holistic health. Yoga also gives us a happier way of life. I'm sure yoga will continue playing its preventive as well as positive role in healthcare of masses.
Today, the world is celebrating the 7th International Yoga Day. The discipline has become a ray of hope as people across borders fight the Wuhan virus. Take a look at this. Today, some 300 million people practice yoga around the world. Yoga is an industry worth $88 billion. It is expected to reach $215 billion by 2025. Yoga has a compound annual growth rate of 11.7%. And these, according to the Wellness Creatives Company, are just the numbers from yoga studios. If you account for yoga retreats, gears, mats, this market, the yoga market, would be worth more than $130 billion. In the US alone, it is worth $16 billion, more than 900 million euros in the UK, more than 25 billion yuan, that's more than $3.5 billion in China, more than $600 million in Australia. This is an industry that's offering more than just jobs and money. It is offering positivity, it is offering spirituality, it is offering health. Yoga is India's positive export to the world. Today, there are 41,079 yoga studios in the US alone. More than 4,900 in the UK, over 3,900 in Australia. Every time a new yoga studio is opened, every time another yoga mat is rolled out, it is India asserting its rising place in the world, sending its message of peace, harmony and progress. You see, yoga is more than just an exercise, it is a way of life. The word yoga comes from yuj, which is Sanskrit for join or unite. So yoga defines the union of mind and body, human and nature. The practice of yoga is believed to have started at the very dawn of civilization. It dates back to pre-Vedic Indian traditions. And some 5,000 years later, pranayama and focused breathing is being recommended worldwide for post-COVID recovery. Yoga is helping patients and loved ones cope with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The benefits of yoga are well known. It helps you lose weight, relieve stress, improve your immunity, improve your posture, physical strength, mental strength. It connects with every individual at a unique level. And I have some very interesting statistics for you. 9 in 10 Americans say that they're aware of yoga. At least 36 million practice yoga. How has it helped them? More than 40% of them say that they eat healthily because of yoga. 50% report donating time to their communities. And this is compared to just 26% of non-yoga practitioners. 59% say yoga helps them sleep better. 54% say yoga helps them release tension. Yoga is India's biggest soft power, and it is very different from China's pandas, South Korea's K-pop, America's Ray-Bans and Starbucks, or Japan's technology. Yoga promises holistic wellness. You do not need money, a gym membership, or access to a track to practice yoga. It does not have to be bought. But when it comes down to competing with other tools of goodwill, yoga is far ahead in profitability. I have some numbers from China. China has spent close to $10 billion on soft power slash propaganda. It has set up some 500 Confucius centers to sell Chinese culture. It launched international TV channels in English, French, Spanish, Arabic and Russian to sell the Chinese story. But guess what? None of this has helped in burnishing the dragon's image. Yoga, on the other hand, has spread the story of India's uniqueness and goodwill around the world. You see, there's a reason why yoga is so popular. Despite being deeply rooted in Indian culture, it is open to adapting and evolving with the times. Google data says new yoga trends include goat yoga, yin yoga and YouTube yoga. Well, whatever works for you. What's more, yoga has no underlying design. It is meant to improve you, make you better. This is a practice for everyone who wants to embrace it. And above all, yoga is a manifestation of India's message to the world. It is a manifestation of what we call Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. The world is one family. To the United States. It was another weekend of gun violence there. Turf wars and shootouts are becoming daily events in this country. Our next story is about one such shooting in New York. Stuck in the middle of this rampage were 2 children. The bullets were literally inches away from hitting them. And all of this was happening in broad daylight. America's gun violence is a violation of human rights, an untold genocide, and its rivals are starting to capitalize on this. Here's a report.
It's almost 7 p.m. on a busy weekday in New York. The sidewalks are packed with people returning from work. Suddenly, terror strikes. 2 men emerge from the street. One of them is clad in black. He's furiously waving a gun as he tries to chase down his target. Ahead of them are 2 children. In his desperation to escape, he falls over them. But the gunman doesn't stop. He fires multiple shots, some of them inches away from the children, before escaping on his accomplice's scooter. And that is a normal Thursday in America. The children were lucky to escape. They were trapped in the middle of a shooting rampage. Bullets were whizzing past their face, all during an evening stroll just a few feet away from home. The shooter's target wasn't so lucky. He was shot in the back and his legs. The police took him to the hospital, where he remains stable. What about the shooter? The hunt is on, but the black face covering and stealth attire make him unidentifiable. Parts of New York have become gang fiefdoms. Guns and drugs are flowing, leading to turf wars and shootouts. Stuck in the middle are the citizens. Data shows that there have been 634 shootings in New York this year, a 64% bump over 2020. The world is taking note of this, especially as America calls itself a crusader of justice. At the Geneva summit between Biden and Putin, the Russian president made sure he brought this up. You could call it whataboutery. The American press had no answer.
Look at the American streets. People are getting killed there, including those who are leading the various political organizations. You can get a bullet in the back of your neck. A woman just ran away from the police and they shot her in the back.
Putin has his political reasons, but he's right. This weekend, there were half a dozen shootings across America. At least 9 people were killed. As long as this continues, America's record will be questioned. Rivals will keep talking about gun violence. And the United States says the streets of Beirut and Tripoli are unsafe, breeding grounds for mad gunmen. Last week, the mad gunman struck, but it wasn't in West Asia. It was in New York. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Just 31 days left for the Olympic Games to begin, but will the event happen or not? Yes, that question is still being asked. The organizers keep reassuring that the Olympic Games will remain safe from the Wuhan virus, but the pandemic is still casting its shadow over the Games. A vaccinated member of Uganda's Olympic team has tested positive in Japan. And India has accused the organizers of imposing unfair rules on Indian sportspersons. Our next report tells you more about the chaos that is unfolding in Japan.
The virus still lurks in the air of Japan, but the organizers of the Olympics are hoping that they can keep it out of here. The Olympic Games village in Harumi, where temperature checks are mandatory, and reminders to wear masks are plastered on the entrance of every room that the athletes will be using. But even before the players could occupy this state-of-the-art facility, the virus has made a breach. A coach in Uganda's Olympic team has tested positive even after vaccination. The coach has been barred from entering Japan. The Japanese are wondering if they should tighten the checks further, but their approach is being called unfair. India is complaining about the quarantine rules. Japan will impose stricter quarantine on players from countries with more COVID-19 cases. The Indian Olympic Association, or the IOA, is unhappy. It believes these containment rules are unfair to the Indian athletes. The organizers decided to delay the arrival of players from the worst-hit countries, so Indian athletes will be allowed in just 5 days before their events. The IOA says the players will lose crucial training time. That's not all. The Indian side is also worried about the food arrangement for the players. Also, access to practice and training areas. The organizers are yet to clarify if Indian athletes will be allowed soon after their arrival. The organizers are battling fires on every front. The demand to cancel the event is growing. Close to 430,000 people have signed an online petition calling for a cancellation. A recent poll found that more than 70% of Japan wants the games to be cancelled or postponed. The organizers, on the contrary, are opening doors for fans. 10,000 spectators can now attend the games.
In light of the Japanese government's restrictions on public events, the spectator limit for the Olympic Games will be set at 50% of venue capacity, up to a maximum of 10,000 people in all venues.
In the past, the Olympics have proved to be a symbol of global solidarity. But with new variants driving up the cases worldwide, the Olympics face the risk of becoming a super spreader event. It is a threat that the organizers cannot afford to ignore. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It's a threat, in fact, that no one can afford to ignore. This virus is tricky. The United Kingdom, remember, was supposed to lift all pandemic restrictions today. It did not happen. The British government has delayed this plan by 4 weeks. The reason, they say, is the Delta variant. It is now spreading rapidly across the country. Is the UK now witnessing its fourth wave? Here's a report.
The countdown is on for the United Kingdom to lift all remaining COVID restrictions, with less than a month to go for the July 19th reopening plan. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that he is very confident about lifting all restrictions by the terminus date. Johnson's announcement came based on the recent data on coronavirus spread in the United Kingdom.
I'm very confident that we'll be able to go through with step 4 of the roadmap on the timetable that I've set out, with treating July the 19th, as I've said, as a terminus date. I think that's certainly what the data continues to indicate.
Boris Johnson added that he has complete confidence in the British Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Johnson's clarification comes a day after his former aide shared conversations where the Prime Minister allegedly called Health Secretary Matt Hancock totally hopeless.
You call Matt Hancock hopeless. Do you still have full faith in him?
I have complete confidence in Matt, and indeed all of the government who've been dealing with COVID throughout the pandemic. And I think that when you look at the vaccine rollout that has been delivered by the NHS, it is absolutely outstanding. And I would just remind you that today, under the leadership of Matt and the NHS, we've now done, I think, 80% of adults in this country have had a first jab, and we're now asking 18-year-olds to come forward. So we're making huge progress, and that's down to the work of the NHS and with Matt at the top of it.
Boris Johnson also said that he would look to work with UEFA over the planned Euro 2020 final in July, which is scheduled to be held in London's Wembley Stadium. Johnson reiterated that public health will remain the top priority. The UEFA has said that it has a contingency plan to replace the venue from Wembley unless Britain agrees to exempt 10-day quarantine rules for foreign fans.
We'll do what we have to do to keep the country safe from COVID. That's obviously going to be our priority, and we'll be talking to UEFA about what they want and see if we can make some sensible accommodations. But the priority obviously has to be public health.
United Kingdom's June 21st plan to lift all COVID restrictions was pushed ahead by 4 weeks to July 19th. This as the Delta variant continued to wreak havoc. Boris Johnson had earlier said that the time between June 21st and July 19th will be used to further push the vaccination drive in UK. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our nursery rhymes are racist. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo talks about catching a nigger by his toe. Our nursery rhymes are also sexist. Muffet is scared of a spider, perhaps because she's a woman. We never get to find out what happened. She's not important enough. Body shame Humpty Dumpty. Talk about chubby cheeks. There should be no place for racism. Well, does this mean that we should cancel age-old rhymes and write new ones? Why do I ask? Because this is exactly what a lot of people want to do. Not question history, but cancel it altogether. The latest victim is late author Enid Blyton. A British charity has flagged Blyton's work for racism, xenophobia and lack of merit. Works like The Little Black Doll are being cited to back this case to remove Blyton from syllabus, bookstores and libraries. We are talking about the author of Noddy, The Famous Five, The Secret Seven, Mallory Towers, Enid Blyton. She's written over 700 books, 4,500 short stories. They're read by children in 90 languages. And we've all read her. She's been part of our childhood. But now she is to be cancelled. Why? Because Enid Blyton wrote about Google eyes and banana lips. Can Blyton be cleared of racism? No, she can't. But should you punish her for being a product of her age? Perhaps you shouldn't. In The Little Black Doll, the doll is accepted by the owner only after its quote-unquote ugly black face is washed. In Blyton's Famous Five series, cleaning and washing are female jobs. But this was not a figment of her imagination. Sexism and racism was very much a part and parcel of 1960 Britain when Blyton wrote about the doll. Even in post-war Britain, women were expected to do domestic chores. You see, society defines literature. Blyton wrote what she saw. And if we punish her for that, will we also have to cancel Agatha Christie? Do you know why? Because her best work, which we today know by the title Then There Were None, was originally 10 Little Niggers. Next, Shakespeare will be accused of anti-Semitism for his portrayal of Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. Or Alexander Pope will be slapped with charges of misogyny for writing The Rape of the Lock. Jane Austen, too, will be accused of sexism. For while women dreamt big in her books, they never really tried to get a job or to work. Dickens will be accused of promoting ill treatment of children through David Copperfield. Should we cancel all of them? And how far will we go? How much will we filter literature? How much will we filter history? Edit sexist, inappropriate rhymes? We'll be left with nothing to read, nothing to recite. So how do we navigate this problem? Well, the whole idea of literature is to widen one's view of life, to get a window to history, be transported back to times, understand its rights and wrongs. Literature also helps you appreciate a language, develop the habit of reading. Authors like Enid Blyton have been successful in getting young minds to read. Taking her off the bedside tables and libraries will be stunting the development of young children the world over. Close windows of imagination on them, and we can't do that. We shouldn't. Instead, here's what we can do. When referring to Asians in nursery rhymes, don't make children pull up the sides of their eyes to make them slanted. Talk to children about slavery in Jimmy Crack Corn. Teach young readers to identify the right from the wrong. Ask them to observe through literature how our society has evolved. Don't deny them books or punish writers for journaling their times. Think about it. We'll wrap the show. We'll leave you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.